Does LSU have the next Brian Thomas Malik Nabers wide receiver duo on the roster? And if so, who is it?
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. You can also check us out on YouTube. So give us some love. Hit that subscribe button, like, comment, review, subscribe, all that great stuff. Just appreciate you for being here and always appreciate you for making us your first listen every single day. My name is Caroline Fenton and I am your host. And today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off of your first purchase. All right, let's get into it. On yesterday's podcast, went over my defensive questions. Today, it's about the offense. And I think the biggest question I have is, who is going to fill in that role as your number one and number two wide receiver? Is there a Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas wide receiver duo that just has yet to emerge? Now, you might say, Caroline, what do you mean? Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas, both fantastic receivers, both likely to be first-round draft picks. Like, that kind of duo doesn't come around all the time, and I would agree with you. But history would show us at LSU that there is going to be at least one receiver every single year that we don't talk enough about that emerges as being elite. And oh yeah, by the way, you had the best wide receiver duo in college football 5 years ago too. You had that in 2019 and you had that in 2023. So don't act like it's such a far cry to say that you have, or you might not have, that duo coming up in the ranks. Are you going to have a Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas exact carbon copy of the best duo in college football? Maybe, maybe not. But you're going to need someone to step up and fill in that number one and that number two role. So my question is, who's it going to be? And are we going to see peeks behind the curtain of that in spring? Are we going to see this wide receiver room that really feels fairly wide open, that those spots are for the taking? Are we going to start to see some of those receivers try and take it? And are we going to start seeing the foundation of that being laid in spring football? I would say that right now, the leaders in the clubhouse to be your 1 and 2 this upcoming season, and this is probably, kind of a cop-out, but it'd be Kyren Lacy and Chris Hilton. Why does it feel like a cop-out? Well, because those are two receivers that you know. Because those are two receivers that have been in this offense, and those are two receivers that have been productive, but they've been blocked by the players ahead of them. Whether it's a Malik Nabers or whether it's a Brian Thomas or whether it was a Kayshon Boutte last season. There just hasn't really been a spot for Kyren Lacy or Chris Hilton to really break through to that 1 and 2 role. Last season we were talking about, okay, who's going to be the Malik Nabers of 2023? Because in 2022, it was the Kayshon Boutte show, and I'm guilty of it, that it was going to be Kayshon Boutte and then everybody else. Malik Nabers proved us wrong. So I said, well, you're going to need someone else to fill in that 2 spot. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Chris Hilton? Is it going to be Brian Thomas? And of course, obviously, we saw Brian Thomas emerge when he had the opportunity. Because it's not like Brian Thomas was new to the team this past season. That this past season was just his breakthrough year because there was room for him. That he wasn't sharing targets with other receivers that maybe got a little bit more of the love. That you were able to open up the offense a little bit more. You were able to utilize the deep ball more. And that just happened to fit Brian Thomas's strengths. Now, to answer who's going to be this next duo, I think you also have to ask yourself, what is this offense going to look like? I mean, we know that Garrett Nussmeier can air that thing out. But we also know that your run game is going to look completely different because you don't have Jayden Daniels running the football. That you're probably going to incorporate more of a short passing game, maybe more than you did in this past season because, again, you don't have Jayden Daniels running the football to pick up those extra kind of, 3, 4, 5, 6 yards when you might need them. that it's not going to be so air it out on every single play kind of offense. So I feel like the easy answer, at least for right now, is going to be Kyren Lacy and Chris Hilton. But the biggest thing for me that I'm more excited about, I think, than anything, is these two transfers at the wide receiver position between CJ Daniels and Xavier Thomas. Because it's easy for me to say, well, Chris Hilton and Kyren Lacy are going to take that next step forward. Because I don't know what CJ Daniels and Xavier Thomas look like in this offense. And frankly, I don't really know a lot about them, period. I know a lot about Kyren Lacy and Chris Hilton because they've been wearing an LSU uniform. But I'm encouraged about CJ Daniels. I've seen several lists of underrated players or going into the 2024 season or underrated transfer portal pickups. Several of those lists have put CJ Daniels on it. That look, don't count this kid out. Had over 1,000-yard season last year at Liberty, 10 touchdowns on the season, and that Liberty offense is very air it out, very high-powered, high-scoring, a whole lot of yards. So if that's what you want to be this season, CJ Daniels can fit into that role. Xavier Thomas is another one that I think is very interesting. He transfers from Mississippi State, a Louisiana native, 500 yards and 1 touchdown last season. That doesn't really jump off the page at me. That doesn't really make me say, wow, that's a huge pickup. Of course, it's big to get players that are from the state of Louisiana and bring them back to the state of Louisiana. But with Xavier Thomas's, and I'm not going to act like I watched every single Mississippi State game this past season because I didn't. So I'm not going to pretend. But with Xavier Thomas's stat line that's not really, wow worthy, was that because of him? Or was that because the Mississippi State offense was absolutely horrendous? They fired Zach Arnett midway through the season. And we saw Mississippi State when LSU played in Starkville earlier this past season. Like, we saw Will Rogers struggle to complete a pass. So that's what I want to see in spring practice is Xavier Thomas, how he fits into this offense, how this next level of his game could be unlocked in an offense that likes to throw the football and an offense that is, frankly, fairly pass heavy. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to abandon the run, but it's a lot pass heavier than what we saw from Mississippi State this past season. So is it what we could expect? Is the next duo, the next Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, the next Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas, is that really, could it end up being the players that we know and love in Chris Hilton and Kyren Lacy? Or are CJ Daniels and Xavier Thomas going to come in their first year at LSU via the transfer portal and say, no, I came to LSU because I want to be the next Malik Nabers, and I want to be the next Jamar Chase, and I want to be the next Justin Jefferson, and that's an opportunity that I'm going to take? Or are we going to see some more emergence from younger guys or guys that we haven't seen much from yet? Aaron Anderson, Kyle Parker is coming into his second season. Shelton Sampson, who's a 5-star wide receiver recruit out of Catholic High, coming into his second season, who we didn't see anything really from in his true freshman season this past year. Are those going to be guys that we're not talking about right now because we don't have a massive sample size, if any sample size at all, but they're ready to just completely break through? We'll see. And that is really intriguing to me because history would show there's going to be one of these guys that we are, maybe optimistic about, but still have questions about, that'll come out this season and say, we'll all say, wow, like that guy. You mean that guy that's been sitting here all along? You mean this guy who we weren't really talking about preseason as a 1,000-yard season is being talked about as potentially a first-round pick? I mean, that's what this offense needs first and foremost. And I think there's a guy, if not guys, kind of waiting in the shadows, waiting for their opportunity. And this season is it. All right, coming up next, I mentioned the run game, because your run game is going to look completely different now that you don't have your quarterback touting the rock. So what is the running back room shaping up to be? And should we be concerned about it? We'll get into that after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about Game Time. I absolutely love Game Time. And I actually use Game Time. That's the first third-party ticket site that I check before I buy tickets to anything. So you shouldn't have to worry about buying tickets to your next big event, whether it's a game, a concert, comedy show, a play, or a musical. Game Time has killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So my favorite thing about the Game Time app is that whenever you go to buy tickets, you get a full 360-degree view of exactly what your seats are going to look like. You know what your view of the court or the field or the stage will be. You'll know if there's maybe a view impeding pole right in front of you. Like, you get a full transparency with the Game Time app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, really along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we're part of the Locked On Network. And speaking of the Locked On Network, some very exciting things happening over with the network. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So find Locked On Sports Today right now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, we're talking spring football. We're talking offensive questions that I have. And one question that I have is, do you really feel good enough about the running back room? Like, really, if the only running backs that you have in the spring are Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson. And while I am so incredibly excited about what Caleb Jackson can be in this offense, how much more I expect to see from him this upcoming season, entering spring practice with only 2 running backs, that's concerning. Now, of course, you get Caden Durham, a recruit in the 2024 class, 4-star. You get him in the summer. So you at least add more depth, at least another body for the actual season. But right now, as currently constructed, you only have 2 backs. That doesn't leave a whole lot of room for emergency, injury. Like, those 2 are going to be splitting a lot of reps in the spring. That is concerning to me. Now, look, LSU went into the season last year with 8 running backs on scholarship. Like, that is gluttonous, truly. Like, that's way more running backs than you need. But I would like to see probably around 4 or 5. Right now, you're at 2. You'd be going into the season with 3. Now, that also comes with the asterisk and the caveat of what Trey Hawley's future is going to be. Now, remember, this came out about a month ago, a few weeks ago. Trey Hawley, a running back from Farmersville, Louisiana, who just finished up his true freshman season with LSU. He was arrested for attempted second-degree murder. Now, he came out on social media and said, I am innocent, said it was all just a misunderstanding, but he will go throughout the legal process. And as he goes throughout the legal process, he will be suspended and away from the team. Now, I wish nothing but the best for Trey Hawley. I hope that he was telling the truth, that he is innocent, and I hope that our justice system will do him right and will prove his innocence. But for right now, he's away from the team. And for right now, he's someone that you cannot count on. And no, you're going to have to deal with 2 running backs in spring practice. Remember, the spring transfer portal window does not open until April 16th. So you're going to have to go throughout spring practice and probably be a little bit creative with what you're going to do with both Caleb Jackson and Josh Williams. Now, if Trey Hawley is cleared of all of this and he's cleared to come back and play, which again is a big if, I don't know if that's going to happen. And if it does, I don't know when it's going to happen. But if he's cleared and gets to come back to the team, that at least alleviates some pressure from the running back position. But even if you can account for Trey Hawley, which you really can't, but let's just in a fantasy world count on him. And then you have Caden Durham coming in. Those 2, in addition to Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson, it still doesn't feel like enough. Because what if you have one single injury Let's say to Caleb Jackson. Do you trust Josh Williams being your number one go-to, really kind of only guy in addition to Trey Holly, if he's even back? So the running back position, it's tough. The Trey Holly situation, I understand how dire and sensitive of a situation it is independent of football, but I'm just looking at it right now through a football landscape. That's not something you can plan for, obviously. That's not something that you can expect, but things happen, unfortunately, and that's the reason why you accommodate for that depth. Injuries happen, unfortunately. Again, knock on wood. But 3 running backs going into the season, it's frankly, it's just not enough. Now, I don't know what guy would be available in the spring transfer portal window. And what do we always say about the spring transfer portal window? You're never going to get the kind of guy that's a total game changer, game wrecker. Like, you look at some of the players that transferred in this past transfer portal window. Like, just look at Ole Miss's haul that they got in the transfer portal. They got one of the best defensive players in America, and Walter Nolan in the first transfer portal window. Those kind of guys just don't really become available in the spring, regardless of position, running back, D tackle, corner, wide receiver, whatever it might be, because they're most likely transferring because they're not going to get an opportunity to start at their initial stop. So you're probably just picking up a bunch of backups, bodies, depth pieces. And I know that Brian Kelly doesn't want to have to rely on the transfer portal, but sometimes you just need depth. Sometimes you just need bodies. And right now, that running back room, it needs bodies. Man, oh man, did you go from, stacked to now not stacked real quick. 8 scholarship running backs this past year. Now you're down to 2 in the spring, which of course we know those numbers very much so could change. All right, coming up next, big old ball game for the LSU Tigers on the hardwood tonight at Arkansas. This game and the season finale, regular season finale rather, against Missouri, incredibly critical games. And those games could dictate how much further your season goes. And we'll explain coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We got a big old ball game going down tonight at Bud Walton Arena. The LSU Tigers on the hardwood taking on the Arkansas Razorbacks tonight, 6 p.m. Central tip on the SEC Network. And this is a big one because LSU is now playing for a bid into postseason play. Right now, LSU is playing for a bid in the NIT. So if you're not familiar, the way that the NIT works, the way that NIT bids work, the 2 highest rated teams in the net that do not get bids to the NCAA tournament, they get bids to the NIT. So right now, LSU is on the outside looking in of an NIT bid. Right now, Texas A&M and Ole Miss are on the outside looking in of the NCAA tournament. Texas A&M is sitting at 55 in the net rankings. Ole Miss at 79. They fell from 78 after losing at Georgia last night. So right now, Texas A&M and Ole Miss would get the bid to the NIT, but LSU could still creep their way into the NIT if you beat Arkansas Arkansas tonight, Missouri this weekend, and you win at least one game in the SEC tournament. I don't think that just beating Arkansas and Missouri is going to be enough because Arkansas and Missouri are both pretty bad teams. But if you're able to win a game or 2. I think that in the SEC tournament, I think that is really what push LSU over the edge. They're not gonna be able to eclipse Texas A&M. Texas A&M is just too high up in the net rankings for LSU to leapfrog them with the 2 teams that they have left, at least on the regular season schedule. But looking at LSU being able to leapfrog Ole Miss at 79 when LSU is sitting at 88 in the net rankings, I think that is significantly more realistic. But you at least have to beat Arkansas tonight, and you have to beat Missouri this weekend. The good news is, I don't think that that's the tallest task. I don't think that that's really asking too much. Missouri has yet to win a game in SEC play. Like, we got 2 games left. Like, yikes. Arkansas is not a great team in the slightest. Bud Walton Arena is still not an easy place to play. It's not the easiest place to get to either. But this Arkansas team is a shell of what we kind of have grown accustomed to seeing from Arkansas and Eric Musselman coach teams over the last few years. So this is a game, frankly, you should beat. You should beat Missouri this weekend. You should beat Arkansas tonight. It's just a matter of, are you able to show up and are you able to take care of business? I think that LSU should be able to do that. Now, Nashville, the SEC tournament, that's a different story. I don't think that they're going to draw any sort of world beaters, at least in the first round of the tournament. So that's going to help the net, especially getting a win in a tournament setting. Right now, frankly, I don't love LSU's chances of making the NIT, but you win these first 2 games, it gets you into the tournament, at least riding high, winning, what is it? If they win these next 2 games, 6 of your last 7, if my math is correct. So at least you're feeling good. And at least you're riding a high confidence. And look, I understand that barely eking into the NIT is not really what we would want from this program, but I don't know how much more you could have expected. I frankly believe that Matt McMahon has exceeded expectations for this season. Now, that doesn't mean that the expectations next year are going to be barely squeaking into the NIT. Like, I want to see continued progress. I want to see winning those close games instead of losing some of the close games that you lost this past season. You beat 2 top 20 teams in Kentucky and South Carolina in back-to-back outings. Like, you know what this team is capable of. This is a better team this year than it was last year. You're going to have to continue to raise that bar, and that ultimately is on Matt McMahon, and that ultimately is going to be what keeps Matt McMahon at LSU. I have no business wanting to fire Matt McMahon because I think the job that he took on, frankly, was not an easy one in the slightest, and you need to give the man at least 2 seasons. And so, barely eking into the NIT, do you want more from your basketball program? Absolutely. Eventually, you're going to get to that point. This season, get into the NIT and see if you can ruffle some feathers and make some noise. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked In LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked In LSU, massive recruiting weekend for LSU. So Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, will join us.